Hey, what's good, champions? Arian, Tyson here. I wanted to shoot this video because there has been a lot of thoughts that I've had regarding this weekend's events with the ongoing anthem protest. And what I've discovered, what I've learned, is really with the blatant hypocrisy of certain NFL players, past and present, the NFL owners, the NFL in general, and number 45. And so I'm going to address as much of it as I can in this video, because it's really making me sick to my stomach. And this is one of the very reasons why I am not watching football. But of course, it's a story, because if you're on social media or on YouTube, you will undoubtedly see videos or comments being made about it in your news feeds. It's a trending topic, etc. And so I want to address really the NFL, because this really goes back to last year. It goes back to when Colin Kaepernick decided to kneel, to sit down for the national anthem, and then ultimately kneel for the national anthem. And since that time, he cannot find work in the NFL, despite the fact that he threw 16 touchdowns, 4 interceptions last year on a sorry team. Yeah, the team was sorry, but he put up decent numbers, especially when these numbers are better than half of the players, half of the quarterbacks that have gotten signed in this offseason. You literally had players retire and get an opportunity to get back in the league and get a starting quarterback position over a guy who threw 16 touchdowns to only 4 interceptions last year, who's younger than most of them, who has actually played in a Super Bowl and was one throw away from being back in a second Super Bowl. Here's my issue with the NFL since Colin Kaepernick has brought this up. It has caused people to really see the ugly underlying history of the U.S. That's just a fact. This country was founded on protests. And it's amazing that this man is being held out of the NFL because he made a silent protest. That's very hypocritical as a country when he has the right to do it and he's doing it peacefully. He's committed no crime, but in the court of public opinion, he has been vilified by so-called patriots. Well, let me give you some facts about this issue with the Pledge of Allegiance or the National Anthem. Do you really even know the history behind it? Because the fact is, he does not have to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. And even according to the NFL, there is no policy in place in the NFL that says you are required to stand for the national anthem. It is a policy in the NBA, but not in the NFL. And so with that, I want to give you some quotes. These are not quotes that I've made up. These are quotes that have happened, that have been rolled down from the Supreme Court, that were in place long before I was even thought of. So I want to turn your attention to a quote. And I just shared this on my Facebook page today. I shared it on this day last year, so I reshared it. In 1943, are you aware that in 1943, quote, The United States Supreme Court ruled in West Virginia State Board Education versus Barnett that government officials cannot force anyone to participate in patriotic rituals, including the Pledge of Allegiance. No public school employee, no teacher, vice principal, coach, or superintendent can legally force you to say the pledge or stand for the pledge. They also cannot punish you for refusing to participate. What does that mean in a heartbeat? In a nutshell, that means you don't have to stand for the pledge. You don't. And according to that same U.S. Supreme Court in 1943, quote, if there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by word or act their faith therein. In the United States, we have freedom of speech, freedom of choice, freedom of the press, freedom of religion. So we say. Colin Kaepernick has exercised his constitutional right. And truth be told, the NFL the players recently just started standing for the national anthem. But this is the issue that I have with the NFL right now, which is why I am not supporting the NFL right now. I have not watched a single game. I have no intention on watching a single game until a lot of things change. Prior to 2009, I'm not sure if you're aware of this. Prior to 2009, the players did not stand on the sideline during the singing of the national anthem. And the problem with that is that this idea of paid patriotism came into place. Why? Because the NFL received money from the Department of Defense. Millions. And this was something that was put in place under former President Barack Obama. So not even over the last 10 years has a league that has been in existence for almost 100 years, the players stood on the sidelines for the national anthem. And even there's an issue in itself with the national anthem. And I thank Colin Kaepernick for kneeling, for choosing to sit down and then kneel for the national anthem, because it brought something to us that many of us, myself included, were not aware of. And that was that there's more than one stanza to the national anthem, although I've never heard anyone sing it. But as I did my research, I discovered that third stanza of the national anthem that is very offensive. And there's two lines that I'm going to point out where it says, quote, no refuge could save the hireling and slave from the terror of flight or the gloom of the grave, end quote. Here's the problem with that. Francis Scott Key, who wrote the national anthem, was a slave owner. So who are those slaves that he was talking about? During the War of 1812, folks that looked like me were slaves. So imagine my surprise when this is brought to my attention, because I was never aware that there was more than one stanza to the national anthem, because I've never heard it sung. And I've seen Marvin Gaye sing it. I've seen Whitney Houston sing it, and apparently they never sung the whole song. I wonder, had they sung the song if they knew that it was more than one verse to it. But we'll never know, because they're no longer with us in the physical. Here's the reality. since Colin Kaepernick's protest, which he emphatically said, it is not about the troops. It is not about those who have served in the armed services. It is not to show disrespect to them. That seems to have been completely glossed over, what he said, because even though he was the original person who did it, they gained it national attention. People completely gloss over it now, because the truth of the matter is this: it has forced us to really look at what has always been in this country, and people don't like it. It's one thing, it makes me think that America in general has always been too close to the mirror to see what other people see. And so now that people have taken a step back, we're calling stuff out, and we're calling out the hypocrisy. Having said all that, I'm going to call out the hypocrisy of certain individuals who have been on record saying that they have an issue with Kaepernick's protest. But then this past weekend, I see them protesting in the same manner that Kaepernick protested. And then they want to say that it was because of what 45 said. So because 45 referred to those who kneel for the anthem as SOBs, and that they should be fired, that got a rise out of you, and you decided to kneel in quote unquote solidarity with your brothers. But you had a problem with one of your brothers last year kneeled, and you threw him under the bus, and you said that he was wrong for what he did. And then one person, Ray Lewis, because I'm going to say his name, went on record saying that he would never kneel. And I understand, yeah, I have family that has served in the armed services. I have family in the armed services. So what? The issue of what Kaepernick was doing was not about the armed services. It's bigger than that. It's bigger than the game of football, and people don't seem to understand that, or they act like they don't want to understand it. Somehow it's unpatriotic if you don't stand for the national anthem when it is in law from a court ruling that you cannot be forced to stand. The NFL says that they encourage you to stand. It is not a requirement. And then the fact that Donald Trump decides, I was not supposed to say his name. 45 decides that those that should be, not only should they be fired, do you realize that that's an impeachable offense? I don't know if he's aware of that, but just on that alone, he can be impeached. I'm going to draw your attention to something. This is an actual quote. U.S. Code 227, wrongfully influencing a private entity's employment decisions by a member of Congress or an officer or an employee of the legislative or executive branch. What does that mean? Okay, the president is a member of the executive branch, and the NFL is a private entity. When he encouraged owners to fire the SOBs, quote unquote, who kneel for the national anthem, he is basically influencing a private entity, the NFL, in making employment decisions. That is an impeachable offense according to Section 2105 of Title V of the United States Code. That is a fact. But I take issue with him, but not for the reason that you think. I actually applaud him because he's been very consistent. He's been very consistent in who he really is. But for those 60 plus million people that voted him into office, This is what you voted into office. He has been consistent the entire way. And I respect consistency. What I don't respect is hypocrisy. And the hypocrisy comes from the owners of the NFL. It comes from people like Ray Lewis. Every owner, almost every owner, commented on Donald Trump's remarks. But yet, some of those owners contributed millions of dollars to his presidential campaign. But because he says something that you know ultimately will affect your bottom line, now you want to stand with the players. Now you're acting like you're in solidarity with the players. But last I checked, Colin Kaepernick was part of that NFL fraternity last year. And you have blackballed him and have kept him out of the NFL. And you have bona fide scrubs getting contracts. You have players who have been retired getting contracts over this man who is not even 30, still in his prime. I have a problem with that. But I also have a problem with Ray Lewis. Because for you to say that you would never kneel for the national anthem, and then imagine my surprise when I find out that you go to London for the Ravens-Jaguars game, and there are videos and photos of you kneeling with the Ravens players, but then you don't take it, but you don't leave it there. You decide to kneel on both knees. You take two knees and call yourself locking arms as well. That makes you very hypocritical. As if if that's not the pot calling the kettle black. I have a problem with that. And I heard Shannon Sharp's comments. I applaud Shannon Sharp because he was dead on. And I'm quite curious to find out what he has to say to you, because I know he has a lot to say to you, because he said a lot today on Undisputed. And he said he was going to address you. And he's one of the few people that has been outspoken and has educated the masses since day one about the anthem and about the protest. And the protest was never about disrespecting the troops or the armed services of those who have fought for this country. It was never about that. But somehow it's been made to quote unquote be about that. And it was never about that. And it's still not about that. But it's easy to deflect from what the real issue is. And that there is an ongoing issue that has been going on in this country since the country was founded in 1776. This goes back to 1619, if you want to be honest. This goes back to when the first slaves came and landed in Virginia in 1619. So we're coming up on nearly 400 years. The U.S. was not founded until 1776. That's a fact. And so when it's all said and done, all I ask is for consistency. Don't bring up the reason that you have a problem with somebody kneeling for the anthem because it's showing disrespect to the troops. No, it's not. Because the very reason that that Kaepernick decided to kneel for the anthem, it was never about the troops. It was never about the armed services. It's about police brutality and the fact that unarmed blacks and other melanated people are being gunned down by law enforcement. if you're going to do something, be consistent. Be consistent. I have an issue with LaShawn McCoy as well, because what he actually did was rather shady. You had an issue with Colin Kaepernick kneeling for the anthem. But yesterday, Jim Kelly called you out because not only did you didn't kneel for the anthem, you basically stretched. So you just totally dismissed the anthem. And then you brought up the reason that you did it was because of 45's comments. That's a good reason. But that makes you look very hypocritical too, because you called out the person who originally did it and said that he was wrong, but somehow you right. That makes you hypocritical as well. So I need y'all to get it together. And yeah, and Ray Lewis, yeah, I'm going to need you to come in front of the congregation and explain yourself, because that's a weak move. That's weak. And it doesn't diminish the fact that, you know, yeah, you're a first ballot Hall of Famer, arguably one of the greatest linebackers to ever play the game, top 5 linebackers ever to play the game. Doesn't diminish that. But it makes you hypocritical. And one thing that our community don't like is hypocrites. Because if that's something that, if it's one thing that we agree on, is that we don't like phony people and we don't like hypocrisy. So I'm really going to need the NFL and the country in general to stop being hypocritical. Let your yes be yes, let your no be no. Because if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything. And I need those owners to grow a backbone and stop acting like you all patriotic, when in reality, all you're worried about is your bottom line. Period. It is what it is. So having said all that, I did not want this video to be that long. But like I said on Facebook, I had a lot to say. And so leave me a comment. It really don't matter if you agree, if you disagree with me. But at the same token, I hit you with facts. And facts trump beliefs. Period. And if you question anything I say, do your research. Because that's what I did. And stop doing stuff blindly just because that's how we supposedly have always done it. All tradition is not good tradition. That's the bottom line. And these owners are worried about the bottom line, because if this really gets big in the way that it should, and people stop going to games, that affects their revenue. If people stop watching, which we already know ratings are down, that's going to affect their bottom line. It's one thing for people to not watch the game, but it's another thing when people stop coming to the games and embracing your product. This is bigger than the players. This is bigger than the owners. Doesn't matter if they're billionaire owners. This is bigger than them. This is even bigger than the NFL itself. This is about an issue that has been going on since before the inception of America in general. The police were the slave patrol. They morphed into the police. They started off catching slaves. That same police brutality is still going on in 2017. Think about it. Peace.